Welcome to the new sound of online radio. Welcome to the sound of Universal Broadcasting Network. 'Cause you make me feel like I've been locked out of heaven. A mix of today's hits and hard-to-find favorites, combined with the most entertaining and intriguing talk anywhere. This is your sound. This is the sound of Universal Broadcasting Network at ubnradio.com.
Yo, Richard Listens on Sports here to you today with a special edition. We have, and we always speak to our guests about coming back and visiting us, inviting us out to see them where they live, where they thrive. And today we are very excited to have with us very special guest. She is both the Vice Provost for Undergraduate Education and a lecturer in the program in Writing and Rhetoric. I often bungle that when I said it, so I'm proud of myself for getting through that. But she is in town to discuss many important topics today, and we may digress. So it'll be speed, it'll be fast, but today we're going to talk about virtual rowing competitions. We're going to talk about Paralympics. We're going to talk about regulations that are going on and what is fair, what is the way that we can set the table, and we're going to talk about what she's up to. So without further ado, I want to welcome all of you to Dr. Kathleen Tarr.
Oh, thank you so much. Thank you. I have to give you a correction. So Harry Elam, who is the actual Vice Provost of Undergraduate Education,
doesn't write me
probably
a letter.
doesn't want me to be. I work in that the program in Writing and Rhetoric is under the Vice Provost.
I see.
So that is where that credit comes.
I
But I am
see.
not actually the Vice Provost.
Okay,
Although
maybe
that's happened. You're not
someday.
the first.
Really?
You're not the first. That's been taken off. So we'll see.
And you host an annual conference, which I was able to attend last year and hopefully again in the future, which is on diversity in journalism.
Equity in the entertainment industry. Yeah, so even
You said it
beyond,
much better.
well, beyond even just journalism, it's just in all media forms of media.
And that was in January, February?
It was, I think, March 9th this year with Patricia Velasquez delivering the keynote. Most people know her as Ankh Sunamun in the Mummy movies, the original Mummy movies, and she was kind enough to, and generous enough, as all of the participants were, to come and do that on my very low budget, to come deliver a keynote.
Well, it's an amazing experience, and now that they stream the entire day, if you can attend it or find out about it, I recommend that all of you do. I learned quite a bit about diversity numbers in film and television, including with disability, things that I think I took for granted or was not quite aware of. Maybe that's the way the media can portray things rather successfully. So I appreciate that, and
Thank you.
that information is really helping. I hope to push forward change at whatever interval.
Thank you.
You're welcome. So we have learned new things about you, that you are also in your habit and your hobbies. Apparently, you not only row, but you row competitively.
Yes, I row competitively. I was fortunate enough to actually win the World Championships this year, and as well as the Crash B Sprints, which are in the Boston area at Agnes Arena this year, which are the two big regattas.
Okay.
Yeah.
So now I used to love the regatta as a kid at camp, but for those of our listeners that are not familiar with rowing, or it's virtual rowing. So does that mean, I saw that the finals are like a bunch of people in different countries? I mean, how does it work out?
Yeah, so the World Rowing Championships are actually in person. They're all on indoor rowing machines. But they're actually all in one place. So you'll have an arena. What happened about 6 weeks ago was the World Rowing Virtual Indoor Sprints, which actually allows anybody to be anywhere in the world. You can upload your data with ERG data, which is one of the apps, or you can put the verification code or whatever that is. If you row and you row 1,000 meters during that time and you actually bothered to upload it to the Concept 2 logbook, you have entered the race. So this year I kind of sat out. I was actually pretty sick this year going into all of the championships. So my doctor's like, you really need to rest. So excuse me, I have a time that ended up qualifying for the virtual, but I wasn't really going after it this year.
Wow. And I read
Yeah.
something really interesting, which is people who've never rowed before can participate.
Absolutely. It's anybody who rows. If you're on a Concept 2 ergometer, it has to be Concept 2, which is frankly the best for training for actual competitive Olympic rowers anyway. So, and that's why the whole competitive Crash B stands for Charles River All-Star Has-Beens, which started, I think, in the 90s with a bunch of Olympic rowers who decided to start competing against each other on the indoor rower, and it took off. And so
Wow.
It's been around since then. Yeah.
So that's great because
Yeah.
we're constantly looking for ways that people can become athletic or try something for the first time.
Yes.
Or say, I'm training for
Yeah.
this event.
Yeah, and more adaptive. I'm always trying to get more people who don't have access to rowing to enter. So it's adaptive rowers. It's low income because rowing tends to be an elite sport, but indoor rowing you can do at your gym, right? So trying to get people who wouldn't normally be participating in rowing to compete. It's really nice that way. And I want to
Yes.
give a shout out to CrewFit, which is a gym that I work out and train at in Montclair, California, and Oakland. And they do a fantastic job of motivating people to participate in these online virtual challenges.
Wow. All right. Well, now I'm going to have to get some data and see if I can up my erg
That's
game.
right. Have some world records.
Do you have to be on an erg, or it can also be, it just has to have that certain technology?
You have to be on a Concept 2 erg. Yeah, on the rowing erg. I know you do ski erg.
Yes.
Yeah, so they do have challenges for ski erg. I don't have a ski erg.
Is
I've
it
never
weird
done it.
that I visualize myself as Lindsey Vonn? Is that?
I think that's awesome.
I mean, I need to watch more male skiing, maybe.
Yeah, but go to Concept 2 online and just see what their competition is. I know they have ski erg challenges. I just don't have one, so I never enter, but you should do it.
I think I might. And the
Yes.
truth is, I'm like scared of these really big ski jumps. So the fact that you can like visualize yourself letting go, I think is really good practice.
And not hurt yourself on the landing.
Exactly. Yeah, you're like, oh, I did it. So
Nice.
confidence boosting. Now, talk to me about some of the. I know that this is your goal to maintain representative sports and education. So, what were you noticing or experiencing in what they were qualifying? Was it the qualification of disabled rowers, or how they were judging them?
How they were judging where people ended up in the competition. So I think in part because I didn't have my own investment in it. I think I was looking at it more and interested in like, oh, how are people doing? And then I noticed that for the disabled rowers, they have excuse me, what I actually ended up having, I was competing with, my doctor thought pneumonia this whole season. It turns out it was downgraded to asthmatic bronchitis, but I still have a cough. So my apologies to everybody. But there are several different categories for adaptive rowers for the indoor rowing competition. It's PR1, PR2, PR3. So PR1 is if you have minimal trunk function. PR2 is if you have minimal lower body. And then there's PR3, which is leg, trunk, and arms. Like there's you have an overall disability, and there are 5 subcategories. So that's physically disabled, visually impaired, I think above the knee amputation, single arm, and intellectually disabled. So normally, and at the World Championships, you would have this where everyone's competing in their different category and their different age group. So for the World Rowing Virtual Indoor Sprints, though, they put everybody together in that category. So it literally ended up that a 62-year-old visually impaired rower was competing against an 18-year-old intellectually disabled rower. So
Interesting.
that was what sort of stood out to me. I was looking at ages and times and wondering, why is everybody, and then I noticed the categories. I was like, why is everyone in the same group? That doesn't make any sense. And so I reached out to Concept 2. They eventually told me to go to FISA, which is the International Rowing Federation. And so I'm still awaiting word from them whether they're going to redraw it and what they're going to do in the future.
Right.
Yeah.
So this is going to force them to up their game because they are happy that they're including disabled participants.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, and it's wonderful that they are, but it's for equity and to not stigmatize people. There's actually an awesome rower. I'm not going to name him from CrewFit because I don't know if that's cool with him, but he's awesome, and he is adaptive in the physically disabled category, no doubt, but he won't compete in that category. He competes against the enabled rowers because of the stigma that not only society has given to it, and I don't know if he knows the details of this particular challenge, but it's like, you know what I mean? So people are still very stigmatizing that you're less of an athlete, you're not accomplishing as much. So people feel like if I get fourth place in the enabled category, that's better than getting first place in the disabled category. And it's like that's a challenge that a lot of people have. And so I think even with the organizers of this particular, they just kind of was like, oh, well, you're all just disabled, just row. It doesn't make a difference how old you are or which category, which of course isn't the truth.
Right. And this is a unique dilemma because, as like you said, everything's virtual, so people can literally be in their home state anywhere in the world, right? I think there was a group from like Singapore or something, right? But so you have more access on one hand and more universality on the other hand. There's some some things that still need to be worked out. So
yes. Yeah, and I mean, I trust that they're going to evolve in the right way. The response that I got from Matt Smith was that they were proud of their position on inclusion and that I can expect that evolution in the future.
Oh, okay.
But it's kind of like we kind of should have done it already, right? Like you really should have done it. It doesn't actually put you out that much to just make these equitable categories. And I don't know if it's because FISA's name, which I can't remember the French, but it's, based in Switzerland, I think. So I wonder sometimes, too, whether it's that the Americans with Disabilities Act is a U.S. law. And so maybe international organizers, I have no idea what the comparative law is from other countries. So that maybe they don't have these ideas about accommodations and disability access. I don't know.
Sounds like a good dissertation for one of your students.
Absolutely. Anybody want to take that as a dissertation? Actually, I should give a shout out to Doran Dorfman at Stanford Law, who's doing a lot of research about disability, not necessarily in sports specifically, but about the way people police disability and what that ends up being in society.
Well, that's a good question. I mean, how is it handled abroad, or have you experienced that?
I don't know.
At other universities or?
I'm not sure. I mean, I'm always really, though, very conscious of when I'm abroad and I'm walking on like cobblestone streets that don't have curb cuts or whatever else it is, or there's no braille anywhere. Like, I'm always really aware of like this is not exactly inviting for people with disabilities, let alone sometimes you see people having to carry their disabled loved ones around town in like backpacks and things like, these converted backpacks to try to carry them around because the town is so not compatible.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Are there any other comparable sporting events now that they're moving virtual and that people can use virtual reality?
That'd be interesting.
That FISA could learn from.
Yeah. I mean, I think obviously the Paralympic movement is absolutely a role model for how to actually include people, have them compete against like folk in the competition. I think the big challenge for all of us is to understand, because this happens in women's sports too, right? So it's kind of a downgrade, right? And so you might be looking at U.S. sprinters and it's like the men are at the top and those are the ones we are like, oh, they're amazing. And then as soon as you're not in that category, then people are less excited, right? So unless you're FloJo or something like that, unless you got a whole nother thing happening on top of it. Or like the women's soccer team, which wins more than the U.S. men's. But they are, everything starts, people just mentally start downgrading. And so even in disability sports, then it's kind of like there's not really acknowledgement of like, this is an athlete, do your respect. It's almost like, oh, look at them competing. Like it's like this very condescending kind of way of dealing with it. And so I think the big picture, we need to understand what people are accomplishing, and actually it kicks ass, and like to really understand who's a badass out there, regardless of, ability status, like who's the badass, right? But I don't think we're there yet.
What do you think about, I think his name is Shaquem Griffin, who's trying out for the NFL draft, I believe. And he, I believe, has only use of one arm fully. I mean, he utilizes both arms, but he's been told his whole life. Right. I'm jealous is what I am. You know me. I'm a former football player, so I'm jealous that he even gets to try out for the NFL. That's what I feel. Well, maybe that's the next movement. Good. I mean, I think it's awesome. Yeah, I mean, I think people should push for themselves to be in whatever sport they want to be in. Yeah. Yeah, amazing. So we're seeing, hopefully, well, it takes intellectual thought leaders. It takes a degree of activism and pushing the envelope to get people to keep changing. Yeah. To really not just give lip service to disability, but to really create equity that you're talking about. Yeah. And I'm interested to know, from our listeners, what models have worked, who is modeling this progress. But I do think as we get more into this realm of virtual reality, the use of simulation, the fact that people can access around the world, it is on the one hand really amazing. We should still appreciate that able-bodied and disabled can be in the same event. On the other hand, and it's been happening in the Olympics as well, even with the disgraced Oscar Pistorius, right? I mean, so and I think you're seeing it more and more now as people running with what do they call the blades? So we're seeing change, we're seeing progress, but Dr. Tarr is here to keep young minds questioning.
Yeah, I mean, I do think it's fine. I think it's awesome if people want to compete. If you're disabled and you want to compete in an enabled event, I think that's totally fine and that's awesome. I think for me, and that I want people to feel less stigma about being disabled and competing against other disabled people, right? Because then, people are, yes, disgraced Oscar Pistorius, but people are like, yeah, he can beat even, enabled folk. And it's like, okay, but it still would be awesome if he were only racing against people who were disabled like he is. I mean, that would still be something to write home about, and that's not where we are.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, one of the beautiful things, and obviously, Peter is not here today, and he's helped me create this show and introduce the two of us. He was a guest of yours last year at the conference, and is in showing me, he's taught me how to do this show, taught me so much, and so much of the way he operates and thinks as an able-bodied person, and so it was really a long time into our relationship where even he opened up about the challenges he has being in a wheelchair. And it was pretty fascinating. We shared that experience when a lot of questions were directed to him about putting characters like him into a play or a movie he might direct.
Yeah.
And for a moment there was a pause of, right, can I accept this as part of me, or do I have to fight society's stigma of I just want to kind of go along to get along and blend in and not cause problems, direct attention.
Yeah, I think he said he hadn't cast anyone he hadn't had a character who's disabled. Isn't that right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think, if I remember correctly, I think disabled actors certainly are incredibly underemployed, but I think even those who are, on average, earn $4,000 a year from acting.
Wow.
It's like $4,000 to $8,000. I can't remember exactly, but I think it's $4,000. It's pretty low. And just, I think for all of us to look at characters.
Because they're valued less, or?
I think the roles every role you get ends up counting for that income. And so I just think it's the ones who are working aren't necessarily getting the big job, right? Or they're getting one job a year or something like that. And so it's like you might get paid well for that one day, but you're not working that much. So your average for the year ends up being pretty small as far as like acting credits go.
Would you count someone like Michael J. Fox in that category, who continues to work but was known as obviously celebrity before?
Yeah, I mean, I would think absolutely, right?
Yeah, because I've enjoyed watching him even as he fights on.
Yeah, absolutely. But I think for all of us, it's to look even beyond just disabled characters, but to look at all sorts of characters and to think about, like, does this character actually have to have this demographic, or could they have hired somebody who was something else, like another race, another gender, disabled or whatever it is, and really start pushing the industry a little bit more, because frankly, that's what shapes mostly how we think about each other is entertainment. It's not, that great court case that really upheld rights for people. Like, that's not really what shapes us. It's what we're looking at.
There's the new spin-off of The Good Wife. I don't know if you've seen it.
What it is.
It's amazing. It's on. So now this is the whole new generation of Hulu, Netflix, and then CBS has their own. So if you get their all-access channel, they have a show called The Good Fight. And one of the law firms has Delroy Lindo as the head, and it's all African American. So it's like, and so I think the point is, like, this is what you're seeing now in society. Why should they all be like gray-haired white people? So it's interesting to see. I was going to ask you actually what you thought with the more media that's being created on YouTube Red, Netflix, Hulu. Do you feel that there's more creation of characters, or is it still just more shows?
I don't know the answer to that. The people who are crunching the numbers would know. And I'm going actually to the Gina Davis Institute on Gender and Media. They have their 6th global symposium tonight. So I'm going to go to that. And one of the researchers, the numbers aren't better necessarily overall. So I'll be interested to see what they reveal. I don't know. I mean, I kind of wanted to tie back to you talking about like what representation means on screen, but Gina Davis had made a comment about, but it's entertainment media is fiction. It doesn't have to look like the world, even if the world is more diverse and we want to see that. It's like, but it also can be even more diverse because it's fiction, right? So you can make it equitable, and that might shape real equity in society. So that was what I was thinking of.
Right. So you mean you're saying you don't have to skew it the other way?
Yeah, that you can just, well, because she talks about the example of, CEO and Fortune 500 folks and all that. And so, yes, the data shows they're predominantly white males, probably heterosexual. I don't know if that's in the data. But when you're having a show or a movie and you're casting that role, you don't have to make it reflect the ones that you're seeing. You can skew it towards the very few women or the very few people of color. Like, it's a fiction. You can make your CEO whatever you want.
You can create the reality.
You can create reality. Yeah.
So Gina Davis, that makes me think about what was the movie with Madonna that she was in?
With Madonna.
Was that Gina Davis? The baseball movie when it was all female baseball
players.
League
of Her Own.
League of Her Own. Thank you.
Yeah. I was about to say, I'm so sorry. I'm falling down on all of my.
I'm dating myself, but that was a good one, right? Like,
yeah.
About, like, what would it be like for?
Yeah. But it was interesting. They had an African American baseball player who was there initially, right? Who they kind of had her as this little cameo who was dismissed to give a nod to the fact that there were African American baseball players. But even when you're doing the Negro Leagues, Toni Stone played, and there were other women who played in the Negro Leagues, and we never see their story. Like, they never show up when you're looking at the Jackie Robinson story. Like, Toni Stone got hits off of Satchel Paige. Like, we should be seeing that.
This should be a film that needs to be made.
Well, even beyond just focusing on Toni Stone, it's like when you're casting a movie about the Negro Leagues, you should pepper in some women because that's actually real life versus making it seem like they weren't actually there.
I'm so glad you mentioned that because our brain doesn't even allow for what we don't see.
Yeah.
So it's not even possible. So we have only a few minutes left. I want to get to everything you're doing, but I have to ask you.
Yeah.
So what are your thoughts about Black Panther? Has been a big film that everyone's been going to see.
Yeah, I mean, I think on so many levels, I think what's really amazing about it and what people need to pay more attention to is that it completely broke all sales projections, because sales projections are what people use to justify why they don't hire certain teams of directors and cast and stories, and it completely busted all that, right? It was never supposed to do well in China. It did awesome in China, right? And there are a number of films that do that. So I think on that level, I think also that on the less positive side, I think it's interesting the patriarchal aspects of it that went kind of unnoticed by audiences. So, for example, Angela Bassett's character, I'm kind of like, why didn't she elevate? Like, she's the queen. If the king is dead, why isn't she suddenly the ruler? And it was never something that was even considered, right? And so I think there are these other elements that people may not have paid as much attention to in the celebration of actually having the story, which I think, yes, absolutely should be celebrated too.
So we need,
What'd you think?
Need some revamping.
What did you think?
Well, I was blown away. Anything that plays off of, obviously collective and individual trauma and pain, but then there was this whole identity. Who are we as a people? Do we preserve and survive and maintain what is ours? And that's a real, like keeping people alive and protection. On the other hand, there's this gift to the world. So seeing that journey and how really, even within the battle between, I forget the two main characters' names, but there's a real desire to like include and heal or understand in that journey. So, but it also showed me how little I know, and I had a lot more questions. It's like,
questions are good. Questions are good.
So we have only a minute left. It's been brief, but we are blessed to have you surprise us.
Thank
come in
you
the
so
studio,
much for having me.
Be here. I hope we get to come out and see you again. I hope you'll be back in LA doing more.
Yes.
Please keep us involved in the discussions with FISA is how we say it?
I think so.
Okay.
I will keep you posted, yes.
A lot more questions, and even about developments or ways we can help or ways our listeners can help in creating more equity.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me. Thanks
How
to you guys
can
as well.
people reach you and get in touch with you?
You can always email me at Stanford, so KTARR at stanford.edu, and you can visit my website. If you want to book me, you can contact my agent at Look Talent, which is in San Francisco.
Amazing. That's right. One of the hats you wear.
One of the many hats.
Yeah. So when you want to make the female, what do they call it? The black leopard? I don't know.
the Black Panther, the real leader, right?
The real
leader,
leader,
yeah.
The real version.
Yeah.
Yes.
They'd probably pick someone maybe younger and in better shape.
Hey, we have a world champion rower in the...
It doesn't read on camera.
You got the battle scenes. You know?
I know, I could do it, but lots of jiggle.
Well, thank you for being here. That's our knock on our door.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, everybody. Thanks again, Dr. Kathleen Tarr.